What up, party people? It's Dr. Steve coming to you here from Elevate Sport Spine Therapy in Denver, Colorado. Just following up on the last video about mobility concepts. So this is number 2. We're going to be talking about some deeper tissue work than we talked about the last time when we were just kind of using these tools to scan our system and see if we found any areas that were feeling a little bit off. So if you found any of those areas, the next step would be to get in a little bit deeper on those areas using either the foam rolls or one of these balls here to do a little bit of soft tissue work on your stiff, sore, achy tissues. There's lots of different sizes and things like that, different variations in how much feedback you get from each ball. Some are a little harder than others, some are softer and a little bit larger and smaller. The reason that I would use a larger one is just to get into some of the thicker tissues, things like hamstrings, glutes, low back. Tend to be a little bit thicker, so we need something a little bit taller so that we can get some compression in there. Other than that, you can kind of just use whatever ball is the most comfortable for you. My favorites are these yoga tune-up balls here, a couple different sizes of them available, but what they have on them is a little bit of a soft covering, but enough stabilization in the middle of them to give you some feedback, kind of a good alternative to the lacrosse ball if it's a little bit too hard for you to lay into them. So first thing we're going to talk about is just basic considerations, things to make sure that we're avoiding when we're using these to treat ourselves. Anything that feels really sharp and stabbing when you put on there, if you can't kind of breathe through and relax into that muscle, then you definitely don't want to be working on that. If you're in an area that's causing numbness, anywhere downstream or around the area where you're working, and you want to make sure that you're not working on there either, because there's a good chance that you're either on nerves, arteries, or veins, and to make sure that you're not really compressing any of those important structures. You can kind of feel around in the area, and if you feel a pulse in there, it's probably a good idea to just kind of not roll around in through there. Other things to avoid are just to make sure that if the pain starts getting worse as we're rolling on top of it, that we back off. And then if it causes lingering pain after you get done, you don't go back and do it again. Make sure you go get it checked out. Make sure it's not something serious and that it is something that will respond to kind of the self-care sort of things that we're talking about today. So there's lots of different ways that we can use the balls. I'm just going to teach you a few different techniques of how to use them to release muscles that are tight and sore. The most basic of which is just using pressure to get into those areas that are feeling a little bit tight. So let's say I was scanning through my hamstring and I found some spot that was feeling a little bit sore, kind of right in the middle. So what I can do is just put pressure down on top of that ball to where I'm feeling that soreness, and just wait on it for maybe about 30 seconds or so, or until that pain starts to subside. Once the pain starts to feel more like pressure, then I can push a little bit harder, and that pain will probably come back, and then we can just kind of work in stages. I usually recommend about 3 stages to go through. So if we get referred pain, it's the same idea. We just want to make sure that if I'm pressing on here and I'm feeling pain that goes down my leg, then I want to just kind of wait for that pain to come back to where I'm pressing before I press harder. And you only want to press into it about 3 times. You can do that kind of pressure work kind of anywhere where you're feeling soreness. If you've scanned over it with the foam roll or with the ball earlier, then just kind of use some of that pressure in there. I would spend a minimum of about a minute, up to about 2 minutes per area. And then, like we discussed last time, we also want to kind of check the adjacent areas too, to see if there's any dysfunction in there that may not be apparent. The other thing that we can do with this is a just sort of grinding motion like we were doing with the foam roller. So we can just get onto the muscle, and I like to work more from distal to proximal, so more from far out to near, and just push through, working with whatever pressure it is that we can kind of tolerate. Work in any of these muscles, it doesn't really matter, just wherever you found stuff using the scanning method, and just working deep pressure, go through that same sort of idea, about a minute or so in each area, just pushing through from top to bottom, and then also working from side to side over either the ball or the foam roll here like this, where we can just kind of work in and out, kind of breaking up any cross fibers that may be forming up and keeping that tissue from moving the way that it should. The other thing that we can do with these is sort of pinning and stretching down using the ball, so we can find different ways to get pressure, either laying on the ground, pressing up against a wall, just pushing in with our own pressure. But one of the things that I would have you do is to make sure that we're adding a little bit of torsion when we find a spot to pin down. So let's say, like, I can't really extend my arms overhead without tension. So I can say, oh, I feel a little bit stiff in here. So I can hunt around with the ball, find that spot that feels a little bit stiff, press it in here either against a wall, a doorway, or just with my hand. Give it a little bit of a torque so you can see how it kind of makes my shirt wrinkle up here. It's doing the same thing to all the tissues that are underneath there as well, which just gives us a good spot to sort of pin those muscles down, work through that range of motion. Same idea, maybe about 30 seconds or so with one little bit of pressure, get a little bit more pressure, and then work through that for maybe a minute or two, increasing pressure every 30 seconds or so, or just to your tolerance. And you can use this sort of thing anyway too. Just find out which way you're feeling some resistance, and then find out where you're feeling the resistance, and then just work through that range of motion. Call this pinning and stretching, or tack and floss, or stick and strip, just whatever it is that you want to call it. We're just really trying to break up any adhesions in the muscles or the tissues that are underneath there that are causing restrictions in movement. So there's really no wrong way to do this sort of stuff. It just need to find out what motion is that I'm having trouble with, where I'm feeling tension, hunt around for that tension using the scanning method, and then pin and stretch using the ball, working again for about 1 minute to 2 minutes in that one area, checking again up and downstream from that segment to make sure there's nothing else that may be contributing to that. Other than that, there's really, not a whole lot else to do with these things. You can work, pardon me, kind of anywhere where there's a muscle. I would recommend getting a chart or a poster that shows you where all the muscles and everything are, so that you can get a chance to kind of know where you're working. Again, avoiding any areas where there's nerves and things like that. So we want to make sure we're not getting any numbness. And then just taking our time and undoing all the little knots, giving ourselves a little bit of self-love. Self-care is health-care, as they say, and it's a lot cheaper than a massage. So if you ever have any questions about kind of how to use the balls or where you might benefit from, go ahead and swing by the office and we can talk about what programs may be helpful for you. If you have any questions, as always, just hit me up on email, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.